Hey everybody, it's Pastor Scott and Pastor Jonathan, and this is Real Talk. This is our weekly video check-in series where we get an opportunity to come and share some information about what's going on inside the walls of the church and also outside in our community. And this week is a little different. It's a little more special. As you know, Pastor Jonathan just got back from the Southeastern Jurisdictional Conference, and we thought we might be able to shed some light and share some information on that. So, Jonathan, I guess the first question is, what is Jurisdictional Conference?
Well, thanks for asking, Scott. Hi, everyone. Let's take a moment to quickly admire Scott's apparel for the day. That's really the important part of this video. So Jurisdictional Conference is part of the polity of the United Methodist Church. We're both a global church, a local church, and we have some things in between. So every 4 years, there's a meeting called General Conference, which is that's the body that speaks for the United Methodist Church. And within the General Conference, specifically in the United States, we are divided into 5 jurisdictions. So most of the legislative work of the United Methodist Church happens at General Conference. That's going to be coming in 2024. We actually just got an announcement last week for the dates for that. It's going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's exciting that we don't have to travel too far. But Jurisdictional Conference is really the place where we do leadership appointments. So while delegates to these conferences are elected by each annual conference, for example, I'm an elected delegate from the Virginia Annual Conference, when we start thinking about who's going to lead the general church, because there's so much other legislation that happens at General Conference, those leaders are decided upon at these jurisdictional conferences. So last week, I was a participant in the Southeastern Jurisdictional Conference, but there were also these meetings taking place in the South Central, Northeast, North Central, and Western jurisdictions. And so the primary leaders that are being elected at these are called bishops. So bishops are the people who govern annual conferences. They set vision and mission. They set appointments. They're the people that send people like Scott and I to places like Herndon, and they're the primary kind of focal folks who lead annual conferences. So at this Southeastern jurisdiction, our charge was to elect three bishops. We have 5 openings. I want to speak real briefly to this. That math doesn't add up. 5 openings, 3 bishops. There's an anticipation because of the different things that are happening within the United Methodist Church that in 2024 we may have to redraw some of the lines of our jurisdictions or our annual conferences. But part of our standing rules in the United Methodist Church is that once someone is elected to be a bishop, they have to be given an appointment until they're 72 unless they choose to retire. So rather than having an overabundance of Episcopal leaders and maybe an undersupply of conferences to appoint them to, the thought is let's limit the number of elections, and then we'll have a couple of bishops who serve multiple annual conferences as their bishop. So the task before us was to elect 3 bishops, and we did that, and now I'm back here, and that's good news.
So the 3 bishops that were elected, do you want to share a little bit about them, and also what does it look like? What does this mean for the Virginia Annual Conference?
Sure. So three bishops were elected in the Southeastern jurisdiction. The first is a name that may be familiar to you, named Tom Berlin. Tom is currently serving as the pastor at Flourish United Methodist Church in Herndon. And so Tom's been there for about 25 years, and he was elected relatively early in the process. Another person was elected named Connie Shelton. And then finally, a person by the name of Robin Deese was elected. Interestingly enough, Robin Deese was not a candidate for bishop going in. I think had 9 people who had put themselves forward, or had been, I should say, actually, were put forward by their annual conferences for consideration to be a bishop. And Robin was a write-in candidate who I can tell you, she gave a very moving speech from the floor that really, I think, opened a lot of delegates' eyes to saying, hey, this might be somebody who's qualified for this work. And sure enough, she was the person who was elected. So your question, though, was what does this mean for Virginia?
Yeah.
So not only are bishops elected at jurisdictional conference, they're also assigned at jurisdictional conference. And much like, we here at Herndon, we're assigned a pastor, right? You're assigned me and Scott. Our annual conference as a whole is assigned a bishop. So for the last 6 years, we've been served by Bishop Sharma Lewis. So at this conference, it was announced that Bishop Lewis is going to be moving to the Mississippi Annual Conference as of January 1st. and we'll be receiving a new bishop. So our new bishop, her name is Sue Hoppert Johnson. Bishop Sue has been overseeing the North Georgia Annual Conference, which is Atlanta and the surrounding areas there for the last 6 years. She's from Florida originally. Interestingly enough, Bishop Sue is a second career pastor. She did not start off in ministry. Her first career, she was a lawyer. And so I think amongst our delegation, there was a lot of excitement for the opportunity to welcome Bishop Sue. I think one of the things that I sense is that given some of the challenges that we're facing in the United Methodist Church as a whole, some of Bishop Sue's experience might be really helpful. She's been able to lead, honestly, the divisions in the church have really been more contentious in North Georgia than they've been in Virginia, and she's still been able to lead very capably in that space. So I think in a place like Virginia, she's going to lead really well. She's committed to the full inclusion of all people in the life of the church. Her spouse is also a clergy person. I think, and she's got an adult daughter, and there's a lot that I look at with her, and I think, wow, we're going to be really blessed by her leadership, and I'm looking forward to her serving, and goodness, it's coming in just about a month and a half, so we'll look forward to welcoming her in the Virginia Annual Conference.
So shout out to Tom Berlin. Congratulations, Tom. What a wonderful move that is for him. And Robin Deese is an old friend of mine from South Carolina, so I'm very excited for her and where her ministry is taking her. So,
and lest we leave out the other bishop,
yep.
Connie Shelton, appropriately for Scott's T-shirt, was a longtime staff person at Duke Divinity School and has since been a director of connectional ministries and a district superintendent in the Mississippi Annual Conference. She's headed to North Carolina, where I think she'll be back home at places like Duke, but I think she's going to be great there. And anyways, all I think really, really good things for the church.
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of people are wondering is, okay, so we learned about what was going on at Jurisdictional. We learned how the impact is in Virginia. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for us here at Herndon?
So in the short term, nothing. It's not a high impact thing for us. One of the things, though, that I would offer is that sometimes when we have a change in Episcopal leadership, that filters down to us. So some of you would remember that when we were in the time of pandemic, like really, I mean, we're technically still in the pandemic, but when we were really in the throes of that, we had some rulings and some regulations that were coming from our conference office that were really driven by our Episcopal leadership. So with a shift in that means some of those are likely to change. Some of the initiatives that we're focusing on, one of the things that I think Bishop Lewis really honed in on, especially early in her tenure, was reading the Bible through every year. That was a really important thing for her. Usually Episcopal leaders have something like that where they're really driving some kind of initiative or some kind of perspective to the local churches in an annual conference. I'm not here to say what Bishop Sue will or will not do. I imagine that there's a really good opportunity to motivate local churches around mission. I think that's something that we have seen historically in the Virginia Conference. We actually, Melissa Billman has done a great job for us coordinating flood buckets. That's been maybe a really recent missional effort that's happening throughout the Virginia Annual Conference. So I imagine there will be an increased drive towards mission. But what I would say, well, I don't imagine much is going to change in the short term. The other thing I would just want to encourage you with is a new bishop doesn't come in and immediately say, okay, I'm going to move every pastor in the annual conference or anything like that. I don't think we should be fearing anything about changing appointments or anything like that for Scott or I. That's something that comes up every year, but that's not something that I think is like immediately before us or anything like that. I think it's really an opportunity for us to be a part of welcoming our new bishop in a healthy way and in a good way, and then seeing how she chooses to lead and participating in that as best as we can.
So I want to also thank Bishop Lewis. Bishop Lewis is the one that licensed me, and so she has a special place in my heart, and I wish her the best in Mississippi. But Jonathan, are there any other last takeaways that you want to share that you think everybody would like to know
Sure.
about?
I mean, for me, this is my first time as a delegate to Jurisdictional Conference. What I told a lot of the other delegates last week is I've never felt the power of connectionalism more than I felt it in this time. And I mean that in some good ways and maybe also some challenging ways. I think it's amazing to see there were 350 seated delegates from across, we're the northernmost part of the southeastern jurisdiction here in Virginia, but all the way down to Florida, west to Mississippi, and pretty much every state in between. And so to see the common desire for the love of Jesus Christ to be poured out into God's world is a pretty incredible thing. We were blessed to be led in worship by an incredible set of musicians from the Holston Annual Conference, which is the kind of the southwestern tip of Virginia and eastern Tennessee. And just hearing some of the different ways that musicality is a part of our common faith, being able to imagine, one of the things we tried to do throughout the proceedings was to honor that this was taking place at Lake Junaluska, North Carolina, which is set upon tribal lands. And so trying to honor the ancestry of that land and the people who first lived on that land was pretty incredible. And so seeing some of that commonality was really, really powerful. It's a reminder to me that in our church here in Herndon, when we set our minds to something that we share in common, when we have a common mission, a common vision, there is much that we can accomplish together, because we may have a lot of different perspectives of how we accomplish that, but that purpose being shared is really, really beautiful. Some of the challenges, clearly, this was a time that was built on relationships. And for me, I'm brand new to it, so I'm realizing like, hey, I got to make more friends. It's a good thing to have friends and people that we can connect with. And I think sometimes when you get into spaces where you're voting for things, it can create a feeling that there are some winners and some losers. There were a number of the Episcopal leaders who weren't elected, people that had been put forth, but didn't get elected. I think it's challenging because those are folks who have imagined coming into the week, hey, I might be moving soon, I might have a new title soon, and just knowing some of the challenge that comes with that. I think finding ways to comfort those people and offer them grace and to realize that the whole of the work that we're doing. For me, I'm pretty interested in some ideas of extending the mission of the church to be more fully inclusive of like the LGBTQIA community, to be more intentional about kind of how we go out of the church to be in mission and community. But there's also some things that I think this conference made me aware of that we have to continue to work on. We have some issues with systemic racism. We have some issues with limiting the elevation of voices of young people in the church and some things like that. So all of it brings me back home wanting to get to work. Here in Herndon, to continue to create an equitable and inclusive community where we're about sharing God's love and serving God's love in community. I think that's a big deal for us, and discovering ways that we can do that not only independently here at Herndon, but in community together with other United Methodist churches and other partner organizations. That's when we're at our best, I should say, and it makes me excited to get back to work.
So keep Tom Berlin in your prayers. I mean, Jonathan just shared this last week. He's got 3 Sundays left at Florist, and then he and his wife are packing and they're moving to Florida. And what a quick transition that is for them. And so we want to keep the Berlin family as well as our friends at Florist and all those that are going to be impacted by the moves in our prayers. But Jonathan, thanks for this recap of Southeast Jurisdiction. I know for a lot of people, they were like, what is that? And for some of us that were really geeked out on it, like myself, I watched it online, and it was very moving. So anyway, we hope that you enjoyed this. And I think in the future, we'll also talk a little bit more about General Conference as we get a little bit closer and what that looks like. So hope you guys have a great week. Looking forward to seeing you this Sunday. We continue our Money Story, which is our sermon series. Jonathan will be preaching this week. And so we are at 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the sanctuary. So we hope to see you there. Have a great week. See you.